En riktig god morgen og velkommen til Børsmorgen her hos oss i Finansavisen denne tirsdagen. Mitt navn Benedikte Storm Bamvik, og med meg har jeg aksjekommentator Karl Johan Molnes. Senere i sendingen så får vi også besøk av konsernsjefen i Nordhealth, Charles MacBain, før kapitalmarkedsdagen sparkes i gang om en times tid. Men først skal vi se litt på Oslo Børs, som endte ukens første handelsdag med en oppgang på 0,85%. Der Grieg Shipping tronet øverst på vinnerlisten med en oppgang på over 77%. I dag så venter Nordhealth-analytiker Roger Berntsen at Oslo Børs vil åpne opp 0,2%, mens DNB Markets spår Oslo Børs opp 0,3% fra start. På Wall Street derimot så var det blandet i går kveld, der Nasdaq og S&P endte ned, mens Dow Jones steg 0,16%. Fredag så endret Moody's Investor Service utsiktene for kredittvurderingen til den amerikanske regjeringen fra stabil til negativ, med en henvisning til økende risiko for nasjonens økonomiske styrke. Markedets øyne vil være rettet mot inflasjonstall fra USA, som kom på tirsdag, skriver da seniorøkonom Sara Midtgaard i en rapport fra Handelsbanken. Det for det meste oppgang på børsene i Asia og stillehavsområdet tirsdag i forkant av møtet mellom USAs og Kinas president. Global handel og geopolitikk topper agendaen når presidentene skal møtes i San Francisco senere i dag, under det amerikansk-asiatiske APEC-møtet. Når det gjelder oljeprisen, så har den sett en relativt flat utvikling siden midnatt i går, og etter en oppgang på over 1% i løpet av mandagen. Akkurat nå så handles et fat nordsjøolje for $82 og 58 cent. I andre nyheter så har Grieg Seafood tapt 86 millioner kroner på driften i tredje kvartal, og det var langt svakere enn hva analytikerne ventet på forhånd. Det går derimot som det suser i LPG-markedet, og ifølge kvartalsrapporten til BW LPG, som slapp tidligere i dag, så satt de igjen med et resultat etter skatt på litt over $122 millioner i tredje kvartal. Snittraten for VLGC-ene endte på rekordhøye $63 100 dagen, sammenlignet med $51 600 i andre kvartal. Samtidig har havvindservicerederiet Edda Wind fått et driftsresultat på €2,6 millioner i tredje kvartal, opp fra 0,6 millioner samme periode i fjor. Selskapet skriver videre at det begrenset tilgjengelighet av fartøyer, inkludert fartøyer under konstruksjon, og i de kommende årene, og etterspørselen etter fartøyer forventer derfor å vokse betydelig raskere enn tilbudet. Her det også verdt å nevne at det i går ble klart at vindgiganten Ørsted trekker seg fra partnerskap for å bygge ut havvind i Nordsjøen. Dette kommer etter et tøft år for det danske selskapet, der milliardtap og kjempenedskrivninger har sendt aksjen ned over 50% siden nyttår. Fred Olsen Seawind og Hafslund fortsetter derimot sin satsing på havvind i Norge. Det kommer det frem i meldingen. Tirsdag morgen så melder også Ørsted om at både finansdirektør og driftsdirektør ferdig i sine stillinger med umiddelbar effekt. Før vi hopper på gjesten, Karl Johan, skal vi snakke litt om Grieg.
Grieg Seafood, ja. Og den gode nyheten jo at Grieg har jo hatt problemer før, og de har kommet ut av det. De har klart å komme seg ut av det. Men dette kvartalet her så det da problemer på hele rekka med Finnmark, med Spiro, Parasitt, Rogaland, ILA, høye kostnader, lavt volum, og British Columbia da med problemer med sjøvannskvaliteten og lus. Da. Og da medfører det at operasjonelt EBIT kommer inn på minus 86 i stedet for minus 38, og det et avvik på rundt 4%. Og det betyr jo at det jo Nordby da, fra Kepler igjen for the win. Han jo det eneste som har hatt redusert. Han har kursmål 68 på kurs 72, så han kommer til å bli nærmest. Og så får vi da nedjustering av kursmålene da, fra SEB på 124 og Sparebank 1 på 105. Da. Så Grieg kommer nok til å lykkes med dette her på litt lengre sikt, men det kommer til å ta tid. Og så investerer jo de da 1,1 milliard i Finnmark, postmåltanlegg, og det jo noe som da bidrar til å redusere dødelighet og sykdom når man gjennomfører den type investeringer. Så,
ja, og det første investeringen siden lakseskatten ble lagt frem i fjor, det ikke det?
Jo, så men det sikkert nødvendig, og det blir jo stadig kaldere, og da det gunstig å operere der. Mer gunstig. Før så var det et problem med at det var for kaldt, at vi ikke fikk så mye vekst, men det har blitt gode områder. Ja.
Nå ser vi at de har jo justert ned slaktevolumet, altså forventningene til det, en rekke ganger nå.
Ja, og igjen her også da, ned til 25 000 fra 29 000 i fjerde kvartal. Da. Og det teller jo også, da, men det er klart det er avviket her, og alle de sykdommene som på alle de forskjellige stedene som bidrar her. Så på kort sikt er det ikke noen grunn til å være optimist, men som sagt, Grieg har løst sånne problemer før, så det kommer de nok til å klare å gjøre igjen.
Hvordan tror du aksjen går på der da?
Den kommer ikke til å gå opp på dette her.
Nei. Men når er det man forventer at de skal få løst disse biologiske utfordringene, disse forskjellige områdene, for eksempel British Columbia, Rogaland?
Det tror jeg konsernsjefen driver og svarer på presentasjonen nå, så han har detaljene der. Men de er kjent med å ha hatt problemer før og løst de, så det er ikke noe sjokk dette. Det ligger i selskapets DNA, det å løse slike problemer.
Får vi høre hva han har å si senere da.
Ja.
Da tar vi en kort pause før vi kommer tilbake til gjesten Charles MacBain etterpå.
Hvordan du tjener penger, det er egentlig mitt hode, er å unngå de dårlige selskapene.
Skadefryd er jo den eneste ekte glede, eller hva man sier.
Ja. Og da må vi mene at den er for høyt til å være bærekraftig, og at arbeidstakerne får et lønnsvekst som blir for høy. Og det ser vi nå over hele fjøla.
Men det er klart, det er tøft psykisk, altså. Ja. Du har bare lyst til å bli i senga og vente på neste gang det blir mørkt.
At Finansavisen skal ha en finanspod, det var det kanskje på tide. Det var jo litt sånn der, hva man sier, har du laget bok av Ringenes herre også, da?
Ikke sant?
Da er handelsdagen i gang, og Oslo Børs stiger da med 0,2% fra start. And for our next guest, we have to continue this interview in English as we have the CEO of Nordhealth, Charles MacBain. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, first to kick it off, like how, as a Canadian Swiss, why did you decide to acquire the Finnish software company like 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I have no connections to the Nordics or Finland before buying the company. At business school, I went to Harvard Business School. I learned about a model of, instead of going and starting a new company, to buy a company and become the management of that company. So I looked for healthcare software companies because that was an area that I had actually worked in my first job in consulting. And we heard a lot of the nurses and doctors complaining about the software. And so as a sort of first-time entrepreneur, I thought if there's these nurses are still complaining about it, but still would never like to switch the software. There must be some resiliency in the business model. And so that's why I decided to look specifically at healthcare software. Looked at veterinary therapy specifically, because they were the least regulated parts of the healthcare spectrum. Thus, you can go from country to country. And so looked at 400 companies around the world in those areas and interviewed many of the founders and owners of those companies and found that the best company doing veterinary therapy practice management software was located in Helsinki, Finland. So flew over and over an 8-month period, I convinced them to sell to me.
Yeah.
So.
And then you were listed on Euronext Growth here in Oslo in, the IP boom during 2021. How has the travel been so far? You started the first couple of days, stock went up to like 37 kroners, up to 46 at the highest, and now it's trading at almost 25.
Yes. I think if you think about the reason why we chose to go public was that it created quite a few different benefits versus a traditional private equity route. And that I'm a long-term owner of the business. I want to be continue managing and growing this business for the next 10, 20 years, right? And so the public option brought you a degree of control that you could not have from private equity, in that, yes, you could sell to a private equity fund up front, but then they would sell you over to the next person within 5 to 7 years. And so that really did not meet my timeline. And so it was a very attractive venue at that point. And we were able to get interest and investments from very sort of renowned investors, which have been very loyal to us. And so, yes, it's been quite a turmoil, right, in the market, as you see with most software companies. But if we look at our growth, we've continued growing every year and have grown, I think, over the last 5 years, around 64%. So we're quite happy with the growth so far. And then during the process of IPO, we decided, in contrast to other companies which raise a small amount every year, right? We try to raise quite a big amount to be able to finance our full growth plan. So we never really have to raise again, unless we want to do a big acquisition in the future. But we still have quite a bit of cash to be able to finance our growth and also be opportunistic with acquisitions.
But Karl-Johan, you have taken a look at the numbers, haven't you?
Yes, I have. So our next door neighbor here is a veterinary.
Yes, Cora.
And it's a growing business. So must mean you have a lot of competitors. Who's your competitors on software?
So what I like about this business, it's not a global business in that like one software cannot work for the whole world, right? Without localizing. So every market has their unique integrations or unique regulations which you have to localize for. So in Norway, we're probably the primary software company for, there's maybe a couple clinics, less than 5% of clinics use a Nordhealth owned software for veterinary. On the therapy side, it's quite a bit more competitive. We've got competitors such as Patient Sky, which is owned by EG. We've got competitors such as Pridoc as well, which is, so there's a little bit more competition on the therapy sector than there's on veterinary. And so in each of the markets, in the Nordics, there's not too many competitors in veterinary, but we see quite a lot of competition, obviously, in the US and UK, which are way more competitive markets. But I like the competitive markets because it forces us to up our game, and so makes it very easy for us to compete in the Nordics because we have a much higher bar to meet in the US than we do here. So
you have this in all kinds of languages?
Yes, so it's in many different languages. We have the software available in 44 different countries. And we've got about over 70,000 users in those countries. So it's available in English, Norwegian, Swedish, I think even Hebrew, where we switched the user interface. So
there's a famous company called WebMD that tried to, I used to be a shareholder once, and it's Jim Clark's third $1 billion company. But the problem is, of course, that then you get into hospitals and you get into doctors, and they like to have things on paper files, and it ended up being taken private. It didn't work even after. So what's the limit to your growth? You know, which vectors can you go into? Are you going to stay with the animals and the shrinks? Is that your line of business, or are you going to take it to the hospitals?
So for now, we're a very small market share globally in veterinary and in therapy. So our strategy we've had for the last 5 years has been to enter new markets one after another, right, and conquer that market. So we've got some leeway to go there in order to be able to, and we can grow in veterinary alone probably over 30 times in the current markets that we're in: UK, US, Spain, Italy. So there's quite a lot of runway for growth. But despite that, that's in terms of new user growth. And the second thing is we can also expand our product ranges. So for example, we started with practice management software, which is a basic software that you use in clinics to manage the workflow, store medical records, book appointments. But also we've expanded to payments, so creating a payment solution for them. We'll expand to insurance and other products that we can upsell to our current customer base. That's a very efficient way to grow the average revenue per user. And then at some point, yes, we are planning to go beyond veterinary therapy, focusing probably not at the hospitals, which are much more complex and have a lot more regulation in countries, but maybe at dermatologists, opticians, dentists.
Yeah. So. But it's when you look at the ways you have to go forward, I look at your revenue growth here, and it looks like the analysts are sort of forecasting 19% growth, and that it seems like sort of an analyst forecast. It doesn't 2 years in a row with 19%. That it's either too high or too low. When I see equal numbers, something is wrong. So what do you say to that?
I can't comment too much on the analyst forecast, but what I can say is like over the last 12 months, where we predicted that our recurring revenue growth was going to go between 15 and 20%.
Okay.
And I think we're on track. In the last 12 months, we've grown just around 21.9%, so around 22%, so it's above analyst forecast.
And most companies in your sector, they like to make a lot of acquisitions. So with you, when you're dominant, and then I guess each time you go into a new market, you buy the leading player in that market and you take over their clients. Is that your recipe for growth?
So we've got a two-pronged recipe. One is we go organically into new markets without acquisitions by just localizing the software and then selling it through traditional sales and marketing routes. The second one, which we've done, and we've done I think 9 acquisitions to date like this, has been to acquire normally a legacy player, which doesn't have modern software, doesn't have the capabilities to build a new software, and has been rather stagnant for years in that they haven't been growing much because of their legacy nature of the product. And we buy those companies and we migrate all those customers over to our cloud software. So the benefit of that is that when we normally buy them, their sort of EBITDA minus CapEx is 0 or maybe 10%, right? Once we shift them over, we can get a significant increase because their EBITDA minus CapEx would then be our sort of contribution margin, which would be around 65%.
But you had this, the thing is strange with all the software companies is that you typically have between 80 and 90% gross margin. But then as soon as you get to the EBITDA level, you don't make any money. So what happens between gross profit and EBITDA? Where does all that money go?
So for us, what we've been doing is there's a couple of different. We currently actually are EBITDA positive as of Q3, which we just announced this morning. I think we made about 0.7 million euros of EBITDA in that quarter. And we are looking to improve EBITDA every quarter. But the reason why we raised money in the first place was to finance our growth. So we had 3 different areas we wanted to finance, right, of which 2 impact EBITDA. One was heavy investment in R&D. So we wanted to make sure that we build the team in place to be able to scale fast internationally, because we see that there's a big window of opportunity over the next 5 years where all these legacy players we were talking about, which are like server-based or on-premise, they're shifting to a cloud solution next 5 years. And they've been on that legacy player for about 20 years. So this once-in-a-generation opportunity to capture those customers as they shift over to the new medium. So that's why we want to be very aggressive over the last few years in R&D. The second bucket that we invest in is customer acquisition cost. And that's quite expensive in new markets, because if you go organically in new markets, you have no brand value, right? No reputation, very few reference customers. So the customer acquisition cost is quite high. And over time, as you get a better brand reputation and more references, that goes down. So that's the investment we've been making in the last few years. That's the whole reason why we went public.
You have a very impressive shareholder list. You have capital research, the capital funds. Yep. They don't invest in a lot of small companies, but when they do, they're serious about it. So they own 14% of your company. How did that come about? How did you manage to get them in? Did they come in on the IPO?
Yes, Capital Group came in during the IPO. I think one of the reasons that they came in was that they liked the end markets we're going after. The end markets of veterinary therapy are non-cyclical. They're also growing quite fast. And then the software part of that with digitization is growing even faster than the market. The second aspect, which is interesting, is that in those markets, there's a lot of consolidation. That means that private equity groups are buying lots of clinics and creating corporate groups like Anicura or Evidensia or Nemes, right, or coronary physios on the therapy side. And those are great customers for us, because as soon as you recruit that customer, every time they buy a new clinic, they migrate it over to our software. So we've got a great net retention from them. And so I think those are the things that Capital Group was quite interested in. And so targeting these growing end niches, and then we were the best position in those markets to be able to grow.
Speaking of investments and within M&A, are you looking to make any acquisitions right now or in the near future?
Yeah, we've been very successful with our acquisition strategy historically, this acquisition migration strategy. So we're always on the lookout, right? The valuations, most of the companies that we look at are private, and the valuations have not adapted like the public market valuations have. So there's still a gap between seller expectations and buyer expectations. But we always try to continue building relationships with all the different players, and every quarter, every year, I poke the sellers, and at some point they'll sell. You know?
But your stock, sorry.
I was just wondering more general about the M&A market for you guys. Like, is it more difficult now than it was before the IPO or during the last couple of years?
I think it is a little bit more difficult because of the fact that we do not have our stock price as a lever to be able to finance those acquisitions. That's one thing where if you have a very high multiple on your recurring revenue or EBITDA multiple, then you can use that as currency for acquisitions. With the stock as it's trading today, I do not like to use that stock for acquisitions.
The stock is trading at almost 5 times sales.
Yes, but it's
that cheap?
So for us, we have quite a bit of cash in the balance sheet, right? So if you take out the cash, the enterprise value would be sort of probably around 175, right? And we're roughly around 40 million of AR, so that's just below 4 times, around 4 times.
4 times sales, yeah.
4 times sales.
But
right?
so it means that you came to the stock exchange sort of 20, 30 times sales. I mean, it's like NVIDIA this when you came to the stock exchange. So people must have had very strong belief in you. You must have had a very strong roadmap to get them to pay that high price. But I guess it was the times.
It was the times. It was around 10 times sales at that time. And that was the market then, right? With interest rates as they are today, right? That has a big impact on growth companies in that cash flows now are worth more than cash flows later. So a lot of investors have been refocusing on pushing us towards profitability versus just pure revenue growth.
But you have the Capital Markets Day today. You're
Yes.
running there in like 10 to 15 minutes. Are there any news to be expected today that the market haven't heard of before?
So I think that the big thing about this business, we took a long time to analyze the different things that make our business quite unique. And I think the main thing that's quite unique about this business is the churn rate, which is basically the percentage of customers that actually leave us every year. And that's around 2.5%. Which means if you that someone will stay with us for like 40 years if it's 1 over the churn rate to get the lifetime of that customer, which is just a spectacular number. And so that's why it's quite the unique thing about this business. I think the second thing we'll focus on as well, we've had very good success in the UK. So I think we've recruited CVS at the beginning of this year that are starting to pilot. They're a big corporate chain in the US. And in last month, we recruited as well Pets at Home, which is the largest pet retailer and a big veterinary provider in the UK. Thereby, we have now, once they roll out, we've got around 25% market share in the UK for veterinary.
So what's your geographical sales mix? What's the 3 largest countries?
So the largest country is still Norway for us, which is great. So that's one of the main reasons we actually listed here in Norway, because a lot of our customers are here. But 75% of our revenue still comes from the Nordics. 25 comes from 4 different countries. And so it would be Norway would be number 1, number 2 would be Finland, and then 3 would be Sweden.
Well, I don't have the numbers right in front of me just yet, but when do you plan on breaking even?
So we're now EBITDA positive as of Q3. We are planning to go cash flow positive, or EBITDA minus CapEx positive, in Q1 2025.
All right. And then you'll focus on investments and so forth?
We will continue. The way I think about the business is that there's the amount that we make before investments in R&D and customer acquisition cost, and then I look at the return on investments of those. So currently, I think our hurdle rate is over 20% for any investments, and that's with quite conservative assumptions. And then we actually have to increase it to 25 because we have too many ideas to reach that. And so we've got a lot of ideas to be able to invest at those kind of returns. So that means it's quite attractive. There are things that do affect the timing of profitability, is that when we do get a big customer, right, we know they'll stay with us for like 20, 30, 40 years maybe. And so those customers, it's worth investing in upfront to make sure that they're successful with their onboarding. So
you have mobile solutions, obviously.
Yes, our software is available on tablets, PC, mobile, Mac, and so on.
But apart from breaking even, getting the numbers up to the positive area, are there other milestones ahead for Nordhealth?
Yes, I think that currently we are our signed AR at the end of this quarter was around 36.2, excluding the 2 big corporates, which add another 4 million of AR. Right. I think one of the big milestones is we've bought a lot of companies over the last couple of years, and it's finishing the migration in the Nordics is a big milestone. That means that Ørsted, which is a company we bought here in Norway, we want to migrate it over to our flagship software, Easy Practice, over the next probably 2 years. And then same thing on the veterinary side. We've bought quite a few companies like Novasoft in Denmark. We bought VetServe and Salamalis here in Norway. And so we want to migrate all of those to the core platform. Because I said before, right, it's very costly to be able to maintain multiple platforms. That's why one of the reasons why our EBITDA is down, because we have to maintain many different softwares. As soon as we migrate all of those customers over, like the majority of the costs from those acquisitions goes away. So it shifts from being a 10% to probably a gross margin business of like 75 to 80% including customer service. That's how I look at it.
While we have you here, we have to ask you, as the CEO of Nordhealth, why should investors buy your stock right now?
Sure. So what I like about this business is the very sticky nature of customers. So the current customer base stays with us for a very, very long time and are very loyal. Secondly, is every year these customers spend more with us. On average, for the last 5 years, I think they spend 13% with us every year. That means that either they're growing themselves, adding users, or they're actually spending more on the add-on products that we're developing. So there's a good, just for the current customer base, right? I think there's very strong financial there. Then the second part is that we have a successful track record of going into new countries. And in the Nordics, and now we're finally seeing success in the UK, in the US, and the last part is that a lot of the numbers now, especially on the profitability side, are tempered by the fact that we've got these migrations. So we'll see over time that the profitability, EBITDA minus capex, will go from where it was before at last year at negative 13% to around 20% margin, with EBITDA being around 30% margin. So that, and I'm not just saying this, but I actually have bought quite a bit of stock back during this period.
I noticed.
And so I strongly believe in the stock and especially these valuations. Right?
Yes. Anything you would like to ask, Karl-Johan, before we finish?
There's obviously a lot of things we could ask. This is just scratching the surface. Fascinating business. So, but do shareholders sort of ask you, why shouldn't I just buy a dog food company like Chewy instead of this?
Yeah.
Because technological risk. I mean, Chewy, they're going to be around and they sell dog food. I mean, do you get questions like that?
Not too many, but I think it's a good how to get exposure to veterinary markets is a very good question. I think there's dog food companies are interesting, such as Nestle and so on. Chewy, which does basically the delivery of drugs directly to home, right? And the consumer side is it's actually one of the things we're looking to enter into in the Nordics and replicate that.
Be the Chewy of Norway.
To be the Chewy of the Nordics, yes.
Yeah, we can distribute to Volt or Foodora.
Exactly.
Well, I think
they're in all the small cities in Norway now, so they'll help you.
We have to end it there if you're going to, have time to get back before the Capital Markets Day starts. Thank you so much for coming, Charles MacBain, CEO of Nordhealth, and we'll be right back after a short break.
Du hører på Klokkelandslaget, en podcast fra Finansavisen i samarbeid med tidssonen.no. Og ja, du gjettet riktig, dette en podcast om klokker. Vi står her med en av de nyere nå.
Hvis man har fulgt utviklingen fra de første Astron-klokkene.
Og så har du en sånn litt sånn Starburst-aktig skive. Men ikke bare om klokkene, vi skal snakke liksom om tingene som skjer rundt, folkene.
Men jeg ønsket meg klokke i konfirmasjonsgave. Alle kompisene fikk det, jeg fikk det ikke. Jeg fikk gullmansjettknapper. Jeg dritsur på foreldrene mine.
Nyhetene, historiene, merkene, hva som interessant i klokkeverden, rett og slett.
Yes, før vi avslutter dagens sending, Karl-Johan, så må vi snakke litt om inflasjon.
Ja, det kommer jo inflasjonstall fra USA i dag.
Nettopp.
Det viktigste der jo at kjerneinflasjonen forventet å ligge på 4,1%. Det såpass langt unna 2%, at selv om det blir 4 da, så budskapet fortsatt higher for longer. Jeg tror jeg blir veldig overrasket om at det blir noen endring ut fra det da. Og det klart den vanlige inflasjonstallet veldig volatilt, påvirket av at bensinprisene svinger mye, og en del andre priser svinger mye. Det forventer ned på det lave 3-tallet. Så vi får jo, det klart det også viktig, men man skal ikke forvente for store endringer. Og det kan jo hende det at det blir en overraskelse på oppsiden også, fordi inflasjonen biter jo seg fast i lønningene nå. Veldig høye lønnspåslag. Vi så vel Stellantis, den store bilprodusenten, skal nå si opp 6.500, men så liksom selskapene, når lønningene stiger mer enn forventet, så er du nødt til å kutte antall arbeidere for å få regnestykket til å gå opp, som øker arbeidsledigheten, og det det som får ned inflasjon til slutt, at du får nedgangskonjunktur, ellers så blir det veldig vanskelig å få den ned.
Hva med energiprisene? De jo litt lavere i år enn det de var i fjor.
De svinger. Bensinprisen har jo svinger. Det var så på oljeprisen, og så bensinprisen har svinger enda mer. Og det jo det er priskrig på bensin i enkelte stater i USA. Veldig billig bensin. Og det jo positivt for politikerne, da. Men, og det en del andre priser som også faller. Orange juice, en del andre commodity-priser har også begynt å falle nå. Men det får ikke vi i de tallene her, da. Så vi får ta ett steg om gangen på vei inn til nedgangskonjunkturen. Det kommer til å fortsatt ta litt tid, men det det som må til for å få ned prisene når lønningene nå stiger så sterkt som de gjør.
Men for ordens skyld, når det man eventuelt venter neste renteheving i USA da?
Det vet jeg ikke. Jeg vet ikke om det rentehevning. Altså, det man snakker om jo at det tar 10 måneder fra siste renteøkning til første rentekutta, og første rentekutta i gjennomsnitt forventet mai neste år. Da. Men det kan man jo lese i markedet hver eneste dag, det svinger jo hele tiden, og så man må jo bare følge med. Det jo et veldig volatilt marked, og det gjelder jo ikke å bli finta ut. Da. Nå ser jeg jo at disse her spekulative aksjene som Nvidia lanserte en ny chip nå uken før de kommer med tall neste uke, så det fortsatt mye spekulasjon der ute, og mange gjør alt de kan for å prøve å berge Softbank sin balanse, og få ARN på børs og pumpe Nvidia, og ja, det mange ting uro seg over. Men det klart det positive igjen, da. Biden og Xi skal møtes i San Francisco denne uka her, og det jo all grunn til å håpe at de kommer med en slags resolusjon som heller litt olje på vannet da, og roer ned gemyttene her nede, og ta fra Putin og Iran, ja, at de ikke så krigshissige som de har vært. For sånn som det nå, så holder jo det her på å skal koke over, og det ikke bra for noen.
Ja, men hva det man egentlig forventer ut av dette APEC-møtet da?
Nei, man forventer jo det at de skal komme med en felles uttalelse på et eller annet som omfatter noe om teknologi. Altså at man finner ut av hverandre, at man kan leve med hverandre uten å gå i krig.
Ja, den store spenningen mellom Kina og USA jo holdt på å si å ta og føle på når det kommer på tech-fronten akkurat nå. Ja, man bør være litt sånn som svenskene, ha litt mer sånn vennskapelig forhold til sine naboer da, i stedet for å nordmenn liksom den jævla naboen, ikke sant? Så man skal alltid krangle med folk da. Det jo liksom ikke nødvendig det her da, så da det mulighet for litt oppside da?
Ja, helt klart, fullt klart, helt klart mulig. Det kan bli julerally av alle ting her nå, så det jo helt utrolig, men det kan det bli. Men så vi fortsatt på vei mot nedgangskonjunkturen, altså, fordi det tikker på. Det for mange ting som i ubalanse, som ikke, du går ikke fra høst til vår uten vinter.
Nei, det stemmer jo det.
Ja.
Vi får bare følge med og se hva som kommer ut av både møtet og inflasjonstallene. Jeg tror det var vel klokken 14:30 i dag, det ikke da tallene kommer? Ja.
Husk på at vi har stor gjest i kveld, i ettermiddag.
Ja, de skal få vite det, skjønner du. For da det jo selvfølgelig i studio på Økonominyhetene senere i dag, så får vi jo da næringsminister Jan Christian Vestre og Trygve Hegnar, som blant annet skal diskutere fornybart, batterier og subsidier, så det blir jo kjempespennende. Det jo også da samtidig som inflasjonstallene, 14:30 i dag. Og da før vi nå setter en strek for dagens sending, så vil vi også minne om dagens utgave av Finansavisen, der hvor du kan lese om forvalter Jonas Andersson i Carnegie, som ser store rabatter i nordiske eiendomsaksjer. Etter hans syn så det i mange tilfeller snakk om rabatter på 60-70% til bokførte verdier. Du kan også lese om DNB Market, som spår en langvarig fest for oljeservicesektoren. Fremfor en boom- og bust-mentalitet så ser analytikerne for seg en lengre syklus på gode ratenivåer, ettersom oljeselskapene ser ut til å utvise større disiplin. Av de ulike segmentene så holder analytikerne en knapp på riggsektoren. Mer om dette og mye mer kan du lese om på fa.no, der du også vil få siste nytt fortløpende gjennom hele dagen. Og som sagt, Karl-Jan, husk å få med deg Økonominyhetene 14:30 med Jan Christian Vestre og Trygve Hegnar. Det blir veldig spennende, og det vil du ikke gå glipp av. Ellers så får dere ha en riktig god dag videre. Takk for nå.